welcome to G Fun Facts Online. Today we are traveling to the windswept heath of Sutton Hoo. The year is 2025, and this legendary archaeological site has once again yielded a secret that forces us to fundamentally rewrite the history of the so-called Dark Ages. For decades, historians and archaeologists have puzzled over an object known as the Bromeswell Bucket. This battered, enigmatic vessel was found in the shadow of the famous royal burial mounds, and for a long time it was treated as a beautiful curiosity, a strange, misplaced item from a bygone era. But recent micro-excavations and a breakthrough analysis conducted this year have completely shattered that perception. We now know that this object was not merely a souvenir, it was a cremation urn. It held the calcined bones of a high-status individual, a horse, and an antler comb. We are looking at the burial of a man who may have actually called himself a count, using the Greek tongue of the distant Byzantine Empire, right here in the soil of East Anglia. This discovery is not just about a bucket. It is a smoking gun for a vibrant, dangerous, and incredibly complex network of trade that stretched from the sun-drenched markets of Antioch and Alexandria all the way to the cold, gray waters of the North Sea. To understand the magnitude of this find, we have to look closely at the object itself. The Bromeswell Bucket is a vessel made of cast copper alloy, and it dates to the 6th century. That puts it nearly 100 years before the famous ship burial at Mound 1. This means we are looking at a predecessor to the famous kings of Sutton Hoo. But the most striking thing about this bucket is that it is not Anglo-Saxon work. It is undeniably, unapologetically Byzantine. When you look at the surface of the metal, you see a frieze that has been hammered into the copper. It depicts a scene of startling exoticism for a Suffolk field. There are naked warriors battling leaping lions and leopards. This is a North African hunting scene, a motif that was incredibly popular in the late antique Mediterranean, reflecting the wild beast hunts of the Roman amphitheater. It is a slice of the Roman games, frozen in metal and buried in England. But it gets even more specific. The most tantalizing detail is the inscription running around the rim. It is written in Greek. It reads, "Use this in good health, Master Count, for many happy years." The original Greek phrase is hige on kro, kiri komi, poieta ete. Now, on one level, this was a generic, high-class greeting. It is similar to saying bon appetit or cheers today, and it was often found on silver tableware in the East. But we have to pause on one specific word, comes, count. This was a specific Roman military and administrative rank. To find the title of count buried in the soil of East Anglia raises spine-tingling questions. Who was this person? Was the occupant a Germanic mercenary who served in the armies of Emperor Justinian? Was he a local chieftain, adopting Roman affectations to boost his status? Or was this perhaps a diplomatic gift from an emperor trying to buy influence at the very edge of the known world? Until recently, these questions were purely speculative because the bucket was incomplete. But the 2025 investigation by the National Trust and archaeological teams recovered the missing base and, crucially, its solidified contents. This is where the story changes from an art history lecture to a forensic investigation. Inside the base, they found the cremated remains of a human male and a horse. This is a classic Germanic rite known as the horseman's burn. However, it was performed using a Christian, Roman vessel. This presents a fascinating paradox. The bucket was originally designed for washing or mixing wine at a civilized banquet in Syria or Egypt. It was a tool of life and leisure. Yet, in Suffolk, it became a tomb. This repurposing signifies a hybrid culture. It tells us that the Anglo-Saxon elite signaled their status not just by owning Roman things, but by consuming them in their own pagan rituals. They were taking the symbols of the empire and translating them into the language of their ancestors. But how did a bucket made in Antioch, in modern Turkey or Syria, end up in a hole in Suffolk. This is where the Bromeswell Bucket lights up the map of 6th century trade. For years, historians have debated two main routes for how goods reached England in this period. First, there was the Rhine route, where goods traveled up from Italy, across the Alps, and down the Rhine River. This was the traditional backdoor into Europe. Second, there was the Atlantic route. This was a much more daring sea voyage from the Mediterranean, through the Pillars of Hercules at Gibraltar, up the coasts of Portugal and France, to the tin-rich cliffs of Cornwall. The Bromeswell Bucket, along with other recent finds, heavily favors this Atlantic route. The key to unlocking this route lies in Tintagel, the legendary Cornish fortress associated with King Arthur. Excavations there have uncovered thousands of sherds of Byzantine pottery. We are talking about amphorae that once held wine from Gaza, olive oil from Tunisia, and fine African red slip tableware. Tintagel was a major redistribution hub. Ships from Constantinople didn't just stop at Cornwall, they were part of a network that likely hopped along the coast, a practice known as cabotage, or moved goods overland to the east. The Bromeswell Bucket likely arrived in a cargo hold alongside jars of Gaza wine. It may have been traded to the East Anglian Waffengas dynasty in exchange for slaves, amber, or wool. Or, perhaps, it was given as a diplomatic sweetener to ensure safe passage for merchants entering these northern waters. This forces us to abandon the old idea of isolated, muddy Anglo-Saxon villages cut off from the world. The Bromeswell Bucket proves that the Dark Ages were actually a time of intense globalization. The man buried in this bucket lived in a world where the plague of Justinian, which ravaged Europe in the 540s, was spreading along these exact same trade routes. It was a world where elites were cosmopolitan. A warlord in Suffolk could wash his hands in a Syrian basin, drink wine from a Palestinian jar, and wear garnets mined in India and Sri Lanka, which were polished in workshops on the Black Sea. So who was the Master Count of Suffolk? The Greek inscription offers us a final, poetic twist. The title "comes" suggests a man of authority. We know that in the 6th century, the Byzantine Empire was actively recruiting barbarians to fight its wars in Italy and North Africa. This leads us to the mercenary theory. It is entirely possible that the deceased was a high-ranking Anglo-Saxon warrior who traveled to the Mediterranean. Perhaps he served the emperor in the reconquest of North Africa, which would explain the hunting motif of lions and leopards on the bucket. Perhaps he returned home with his service medal, this bucket, only to be buried in the pagan style of his ancestors when he died. The Bromeswell Bucket is more than just a piece of metal. It is a memory. It remembers the heat of the Syrian sun, the roar of the Roman amphitheater, the salt spray of the Atlantic Ocean, and finally, the fire of a Suffolk funeral pyre. It stands as a testament to an age that was not dark but glittering with the gold of commerce and the bronze of distant empires. Thank you for listening to this deep dive into the past. We will see you in the next episode.